All right, good evening and welcome to the Berwick Planning Board. This is a regular meeting for Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. If we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The board members present tonight, we have the Vice Chair, Nicole Fecto. We have alternate David Ross Lyons. We also have, via our Zoom, we have Frank Underwood and Mike LaRue. Also on the line here is our Code Enforcement Officer, Jennifer McCabe, and we have our Town Planner, James Bellissimo, present this evening. First on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the August 20th, 2020 meeting.
I don't have the minutes from that meeting.
They were in the packet.
The electronic.
I'll look them up, that's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, I didn't see any problems with the minutes. They were very thorough.
That's good to hear.
So we're looking for a motion to approve the minutes, unless you see anything that needs to be amended or changed on there.
I did not the first time I saw it, but I'll give Nicole a minute.
Thanks. Frank, did you find anything?
I was not in attendance, but I have reviewed the meeting, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I will be abstaining on the vote.
Okay, and Mike wasn't at the meeting either, so since there were only three of us here, I'll make a motion to approve the August 20th, 2020 minutes.
A second.
Okay, seconded by David Ross Lyons. So actually, you were a voting member at that meeting, so you could vote on these minutes. Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have further discussion?
It was just the three of us.
Okay. All right, Nicole?
Approve.
David?
Approve.
And I vote yes, so that's 3-0. Okay, moving on, we have a public hearing, and at this point, I think you all know, I'm going to abstain from these two applicants this evening, which one being the Paper Birch Company and also 11 Pond Road, so I will yield the gavel to the Vice Chair.
I will use the gavel if I have to.
Chairman, is there general public comment?
Not at this meeting. We are not having a... Nope. Our public comment session is at the end of the meeting. We're doing that because we know that there's a lot that probably has to be said about the Pond Road subdivision or the Pond Road application. And
my comments are on.
okay, well, you can save them for the end of the meeting. We do have a public comment session at the end.
All right.
Perfect. So I'm going to open up the public hearing for the site plan amendment and expansion of medical marijuana storefront and adult use marijuana production facility at 357 Portland Street, and that is known as the Paper Birch property. If you would like to speak on this application, please come to the podium, state your name, your address, and your questions or comments. Come on up.
One question I asked is 5 members of the planning board, right?
Are you, sir, are you talking about...
Zoning board, I mean.
This is the planning board. Is this about the Paper Birch property? This is the public hearing for the Paper Birch property.
I mean, because there's 2 people missing.
Okay, we have 2 people on the television. Okay,
I'm saying 2 people are missing. So,
yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, they're on there.
Because I'm saying that if this is the case, it's impossible for us to beat it.
Okay, thank you.
'Cause it wouldn't
We
be
have a quorum. Thank you. Yes.
You know?
Is there...
Another thing too is,
Please talk into the microphone if you're gonna, and please state your name and your address for
Any
the
better?
public. Yes.
another thing too, okay? I went out of my way to drive by a couple marijuana times. You can smell that. Okay? I got one that's up the street, probably maybe a quarter of a mile away from me, not even. Certain days that wind blows in my direction, I'll tell you, it's awful. It's gonna get to the point where not only do we lose property value, now can we sue for property values? I mean, we're gonna go through all this stuff. It's gonna get to the point where our friends are not even gonna wanna visit us because of the smell. And we have to live with that, with our health. And all he cares about is the money. I mean, it's all about a money thing. It's got
Okay, are
nothing
you
to do with
speaking about,
anything
you're
else.
speaking about the Paper
Who
Birch
cares
property?
about the people?
Okay.
You know, I mean, we have our rights, and he doesn't have any rights, any right-of-ways onto Route 4. Isn't that part of the
Sir, I don't know if you're speaking about the Paper Birch property. This is the Paper Birch application. This is not the application for the Pond Road. This is the application for Kind Farms and their expansion.
Farms, I understand that, but
Okay.
even still, when he goes in and out with a truck, he can't go with a big truck on a small road like Pond Road.
Yeah, that one is not on Pond Road. The
know-
one we're speaking about is on Route 4.
He's supposed to go on Route 4. I own almost 1,000 feet on Route 4.
Talking about a different project.
And between, huh?
Talking about a different project.
Well, the thing is, between me and the machine there, the telex machine, ATM machine, there's not that much between the end of my land and that. There's no place where you can go where you can get it. Plus, it takes over a year to get a permit to go a right-of-way on there. I have 2 right-of-ways on my property.
Okay,
but it took
I think
people
you're
for
confused about, the public hearing that we're having right now is not about the Pond Road project. Nothing at all to do with Pond
He's
Road.
gonna get it.
Okay. Are you,
That affects it. Doesn't everything come into the picture?
sir, if you have no,
He lives across from Kind Farm.
I understand, but he's speaking about the Pond Road project, and this is a public hearing for the Paper Birch property. So please, if you're not going to speak about Kind Farms and Paper Birch, then please sit down so that we need to make sure that we keep our records for this clear, and it becomes very muddled if we're speaking out of turn about different applications.
There's another thing. That land back there is flat. Many
Are
times.
you speaking about on Route 4
I'm
where
talking-
Kind Farms is?
I'm talking the bottom part of the hill, right behind me, okay?
On Pond Road?
Yeah, between me
Okay,
and Webster.
we're not speaking about Pond Road right now,
I mean,
so.
that's gonna affect my well, it's gonna affect your well.
Okay, we're not speaking about Pond Road right now, sir. I'm gonna have you sit down. If there's somebody else that would like to come forward and speak about the Paper Birch property, which is the Kind Farms expansion, please come to the podium.
Paul Amatucci, 12 Perry's Way, Berwick.
Sir,
My,
excuse me. If you guys are going to talk in the audience, please step outside. It's hard for us to hear, and it's very important that we pay close attention to what's going on here. So if you're going to talk in the audience, please step outside. Thank you. Paul, go ahead.
yeah, my comment about Kind Farm and production facilities, I understand that it does have an outlet onto Route 4, and the property is permissible under the vote that we had in the town, and I get all that. One of the issues that I think is significant, particularly right now, is water. Water is a big issue. I don't live all that far, basically across the street from the Kind Farm. And water is a big issue in Berwick right now. I have a quarter-acre pond in my backyard, which is now a mud puddle. There's one behind mine, which is part of Dunn Farm, and that is totally dry, 0. There's nothing in there. Most of the wells in our area are probably about 200 feet down into the South Berwick Aquifer, which runs across Route 4 and also into that Kind Farm area. So no matter where a well was sunk on that side, it's going to be in that South Berwick Aquifer. So in specific and in general terms, and I was going to say this later on, but I'll say it now, one of our big issues is going to be going forward. That aquifer, that dries up, our wells dry up, and you talk about there's property values. If you can't get water, you're done. So I'm really concerned about that, and I really think that the planning board must consider not only meeting all the dotting the i's, crossing the t's of the comp plan and that sort of thing, but what we also need to consider is our resources, our natural resources, and any type, not necessarily marijuana, but any type of commercial industrial type use in that area is going to tap into that aquifer, and it's really going to be a big problem. So, so I think that we all need to keep that in mind. That has to be an issue, and I think that probably going forward, there's going to have to be some testing about how much more water we've lost and how much is left in that aquifer.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else for the Paper Birch property public hearing? Okay, seeing nobody come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing for the Paper Birch property, and we are going to move on to old business, which is the site plan review for the adult use marijuana cultivation facility at 11 Pond Road in the RCI zone, CAF Realty of Maine. James is going to start with a memo that he's going to read. We are then going to go over to the town attorney. I am going to ask the members of the public, because at the last meeting, people were speaking over me, people were making comments to me and about me as they were walking out the door. If you cannot hold your comments to yourself during this, I'm going to ask you to leave now, and if that doesn't work, I will ask you to leave during this process. It's important that we keep a very clear record, and so it's important that we all stay quiet, and I appreciate that you guys are going to maintain yourselves. So, James.
All right, thanks. I have a summary of the past issues that lead us to where we're at today, and I also have some bullet points to go through. DEP Stormwater Permit by rule was approved by the DEP on August 13th, 2020, with no further conditions. The permit by rule reviewed the drainage on the site plan and all associated stormwater features. A future expansion building is now shown on the site plan where the existing septic pipe easement is. The access to the proposed Phase 1 building goes over the actual septic pipe. The plans for pipe protection are included in sheet D3 of the site plan. And that was looked over by a third-party reviewer, and that's typical of what happens with septic pipes. So for wellhead protection, I spoke with the Maine DHHS drinking water program, and they said the primary risk of contamination comes from the buildup of nitrates. The proposed holding tank would greatly mitigate that risk, and to further mitigate the risk, several conditions of approval are proposed, and that's on page 3. Staff received an email from the Southern Maine director of the DEP, and she said that jurisdiction on drinking water goes to the water district, and conditions have been requested by the district. On the 1,000-foot setback, MJS provided a fairly conservative measure where the ordinance requirement is building the building, but they provided it to the property line. So based off of that, the proposed Kind Farms building is 1,000 feet apart. Note on the third-party review, Tidewater Engineer was a reviewer. Their scope included review of the protection measures for the construction of the road over the existing sewer force main, technical review of the drainage report, and other comments identified while reviewing the drainage report and plans set. MJS Engineering sent in a response sheet indicating they addressed all issues identified on the third-party review. So the following conditions of approval are proposed. A water sample shall be tested for priority pollutants and nutrients before any cultivation wastewater is discharged into the holding tank, and then tested annually thereafter. Results shall be provided to the town and the South Berwick Water District. The South Berwick Water District shall be furnished with a detailed well driller's log for the new well. A 5-day test be performed on the well with well drawdown readings taken hourly until the well stabilizes. The pump test will be coordinated with the South Berwick Water District and 386 Portland Street, 210 and 13 Pond Road, so the well drawdowns at the Junction Road and the abutters wells can be monitored to check for interference. The facility may not irrigate their plants if the new well has an adverse effect on either wells. A water meter shall be installed to monitor the water usage from the well, and permission shall be granted to the South Berwick Water District to periodically read the water meter to verify usage. The applicant shall install and submit proof of purchase of carbon filtration and the equipment required to produce a negative pressure environment. Number 7, if odor violations are determined by the code enforcement officer, the applicant shall resolve the issue within 5 days. It was business days, but I think kind of to meet you in the middle from 2 days, 5 days, I think that's a reasonable amount of time. If the well water is contaminated with nitrates or other byproducts as a result of the production, the cost to remediate the nitrates is at the applicant's expense. The building height shall be restricted to 1 story. I believe that's 14 feet. That's the building height.
The eve height, right?
The eve height, 14 feet. The septic pipe easement shall be moved before the future expansion shall be granted a building permit. All pesticides and chemicals stored on site shall have a secondary containment. And finally, processing in this application refers to processing the flower. No marijuana manufacturing is defined by the state, has been approved as part of this project. So what's remaining? The septic easement and comprehensive plan will be addressed by the town's attorney. Applicant will have a chance to respond. The planning will review each finding in the findings of fact, and then finally the board will make a decision. So I'll hand it over to Mary.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah? Okay. Just making sure those in the room can hear me okay. So I've been asked, my understanding, so Phil is, Saucier is on vacation this week. He was your attorney at the last meeting, and he's generally the town's attorney. But Phil has vacation plans, so asked me to cover this for you, and I've been brought up to speed onto what happened last week. And my understanding is there was a question at the end of the last meeting asking Phil to give you a general overview of the role of the board in your review process. You have some standards in front of you that can tend to bring in some subjectivity. And so I'm here to discuss your role and your objective review of applications that come before you. So yeah, I have often said that it makes your job much easier when you constrain yourselves to the objective rules that are in front of you and the materials that have been provided you. You have to put your own personal feelings out the door, and you have to review the evidence that's been provided, the application that's been provided. You take the information has been reviewed by both your town planner and the third-party reviewer, and you look and see how those materials provided meet or do not meet the objective criteria that are in front of you. There's one criteria in particular, which is unusual. It's not a typical standard in many towns. It's the first standard with regard to the comprehensive plan. That type of standard tends to, if you spin your wheels too long on it, it can tend to bring some subjectivity into the conversation where it does not belong. So the idea behind the comprehensive plan is it is, as you know, the large vision document, goal document for the town. And it then is built, the zoning ordinance is then built upon the comprehensive plan. And you look to the comprehensive plan when you're passing a zoning ordinance. My understanding is the question at issue here that some are looking into is whether the proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. That decision has already been made. So when that use was voted by the town to be permitted in the zone in which this property is located, there's already been a determination that this use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. I also understand that this lot is in a location that's on the edge of the zone, but it's still located within the zone. So if the thought is that perhaps that lot is not well suited for the zone and the uses that are permitted within that zone, the solution is to rezone that parcel. The solution is not to deny an activity that is deemed permitted already in that zone. I know there's been a lot of material submitted, even though the public hearing has already ended, and there's a lot of case law and there's a lot of suggestions, but I will say that in my long experience of doing this is that comprehensive plans are looked at when determining whether zoning is consistent with that plan, and then anything that's consistent with the zoning is deemed consistent with the plan. So that's for the comp plan. I've also been asked to address the easement because there's a recent case on this. You've probably been told many times before that when there's a private real estate dispute, you have no role whatsoever and you send everybody to court over their private real estate disputes and you just take what is given to you. The case that is recent that was submitted, it does change things a little bit, but it doesn't apply here. In that case, someone was seeking to do an activity on property that they did not own, but they had an easement over. So the question was, has that person demonstrated right title and interest to do what they wanted to do? And the only right title and interest they had was an easement. So the court said, you know, the board did have the jurisdiction to look at the easement in that case to determine the very basic question of right title and interest. That is not the issue here. This applicant owns the property on which they are applying for, and it is an abutter who has an easement. So the right title and interest is not an issue here. And my understanding is that this is an access way that's going over a pipe, a utility pipe. And in my experience, most utility pipes are under access roads. So I don't see any incompatibility there, but this is not a situation that is similar to the case that was just passed by the law court.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Anything else, James?
Oh, I just think now we're at the point where we
Yeah,
review.
we're going to go over our findings of fact. So we discussed this earlier with our town attorney. And so we're going to read through the findings of fact and the findings. We're going to kind of just do a straw vote amongst the board, but we're not voting on these findings of fact individually, just that a majority of us are in agreement with the findings of fact. You guys good? Frank, you're good? Michael?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And we just closed the public hearing on the 20th.
Yes.
On a project that came before us in February or March. At that time, we were told we were voting on an application based on level of completeness. However, that it was not necessarily the final package that we would end up dealing with for findings of fact and eventually an approval or a denial. I was under the impression that now that we've closed that hearing, we still have 30 days by our ordinance to make a decision on this project. And I was actually prepared here this evening not to take an action because I felt we still needed to go through and review all the, because we have not as a board had a chance to really speak to the issue. We have been hearing the public and we've got a lot of great input from the public. As a matter of fact, I was prepared to go through 3 pages of the history of how we got to here.
Please don't, because we've all been here for it.
But, you know, I was going to ask permission of David if I could go into the weeds, because he usually doesn't let me go into the weeds. But the point is that we've had a lot of due diligence on this project from the very get-go to boil down our land use ordinance. We've had a lot of due diligence working with the abutters to make sure we clearly heard their input. But we have not, as a board, really had a chance to offer up our comments. I was prepared here this evening to go through the original application, to go through the type water third-party report, go through the findings of fact, because I'm going to add 3 or 4 more of them based on what we have been hearing over the last 6 months or whatever this time will be. And are we going to have that opportunity as a board to do that this evening? I don't want to rush into this. As a matter of fact,
Frank, I'm sorry, but we are not rushing into this. Like you said, we've been doing this since February. It's September. We've never seen an application for this long. We've had 3 site walks. We've had 3 public hearings, and we've received 21 letters in regards to this. If you're not prepared to vote on this tonight, then you can feel free to abstain your vote. We are going to go through the findings of fact. I feel like we are all extremely well educated on this, And we have our town attorney who has also spoken at the last meeting and today to us about this. But we're not dragging this out longer. This has been long enough.
I'm not dragging it out. I'm just saying I'd like to have an opportunity to put my comments in, because I don't feel we've had that opportunity. We've been taking comments. We've been taking questions. I've heard the chair indicate that he's going to write these down and answer them all. I'm not sure if we've actually written them all down and answered them all. I mean, I really have some concern about some of the information in here. For example, we want this thing to aesthetically look like a farm. I even heard one of the residents call it a pot farm. It's an agricultural use if you follow what we did out on Route 9. But now we've got a specific land use ordinance designation for marijuana in this zone. I agree with everything the town's attorney has said. I agree with all of that. But we still got some questions here. I mean, they're going to put up a 4-foot-high wire welded metal fence with wooden posts. I would think we would put up a 6-foot-high wooden fence painted white to make it look like a barnyard, where one of the residents said if it was a horse barn, it would be approved. So, I mean, I just think there's another round of where we need to put a little bit of due diligence in it on our end to look at this thing. And I'm prepared to sit down with the applicant's engineer and James on Tuesday after the holiday and go through all my comments. But I also, like I said, I've had 3 or 4 additional conditions I'd like.
Okay, well, what else are you concerned about besides the fence, which I think, I mean, I've driven down that road. There's plenty of fences very similar to that on that road, around farms and around horses on that road. So
We have no idea how this building is going to be built. We don't even have a set of plans now that still have any type of building construction information in it. We have an application that shows a beautiful little wooden sided barn with a metal roof and solar panels on it, but then we got a rendering that is just brown walls and a gray roof. I mean, I would like to know specifically, is this a stick-built building? Is it insulated? How is it heated?
But we don't, we've never required.
Take another little crack at this.
Okay, Frank, if I may, we've never required anybody, I mean, Kind Farms across the street, we did not require building plans of them to ask them how it was going to be built. A rendering and a facade has always sufficed, so I'm not sure why we need building plans for this application.
I'm just saying, I'm listening to the abutters.
No, we're all listening to the abutters. We've been listening to the abutters for 9 months.
There's an aesthetic appeal that we're trying to put into this thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to really know what it is.
Okay.
A piece of paper with a brown sidewall on it. I don't know what that is.
Okay,
Is it gonna have solar panels on it? His application showed it having solar panels on it.
Can we have the applicant come, the engineer for the applicant come up and answer Frank's questions, please? I've seen the rendering and I thought you've seen it too. It looks like a barn to me. It looks just like a barn. It looks nicer than some barns I've seen and not as nice as others. And I think we have the rendering.
Department has a set of the framing plans.
I'm Mike Sievert with MJS Engineering.
you.
I don't think I have the rendering with me. I'm sorry I didn't bring it. But from day one, it's always been a pole barn. It's stick built. It's wood siding, all on the outside. I want to say there's one window, and then there's emergency doors and one main door entrance. It's got a metal roof, and it is proposed to have solar panels on it.
Looks just like my abutter's barn next. It's up a black roof instead of a red roof.
And so,
How is it heated? Is it heated with LP? Is it heated with fuel oil? Is the tank in the ground? Is it inside the
The
building?
light fixtures do most of the heating.
yeah, it's propane.
No,
Yep.
no, the light fixtures heat it. We just.
Sir,
cool
if
it
you could
from
step
the-
up to the podium too, so,
That's the rendering. He's had
I mean, I'm just saying, we can't even get an answer.
Well, it was submitted. It's in your packet.
It was submitted with the initial
Not in
application.
this
It
packet.
is.
Yes, it is. And the building department has a set of the framing plans.
Yeah, Frank, that was a supplemental packet that you have. There was an initial packet that was sent from the beginning.
The special ones?
Go back to the initial packet from March.
And Frank, these are not performance standards that you're asking about. While I do appreciate this, you're not asking about performance standards right now. We're discussing performance standards, not the heating source of the building. We don't ask these things of our applicants. These are code enforcement questions, not application questions.
We've got an aquifer here. We've got the DEP Water Bureau weighing in, saying that containment shall be around anything that's stored outside. I mean,
Okay.
I'm wondering if we've got fuel oil, should we have containment around that stored outside if we're on an aquifer? I mean, those are the kinds of details that I don't think we have answers for.
I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, James, but are those performance standards or are those code enforcement questions?
Well, in terms of what is the outdoor storage, is there,
Will there be fuel stored outdoors?
Everything's electric.
yeah,
It's heated
everything's,
by the light fixtures and cooled by the condensing units. It's
Okay.
all electric.
So everything is electric, that's for heating.
Then, are you planning solar on it? I saw that suggestion somewhere, but.
Eventually, not
There-
at this time.
Eventually planning solar on it, which would require a permit, wouldn't it? Would it
Yes.
not? Yes.
I'm also concerned about a little bit more information on the test pitting. I mean, we have some test pits out there that show the depth of estimated seasonal high water. We have no elevation at the surface of the test pit to determine what that elevation really is. I mean, we got a very thinly layered plot of land out there sitting above the water table. I mean, even in our Tidewater report, they recommend test pitting done in the location of the leach field. Reading through this, the leach field for the existing building had failed. I know we don't necessarily do the HHE 200 until a project has been approved, but at least you should have some soils information in the vicinity of where the proposed leach field, and an evaluator analyzing, saying that they are suitable. And then what is the size of the leach field? And is it not only to serve the existing, but is it sufficiently sized for reserve area for future? I mean, there's a
Alright,
lot
can we-
of stuff
okay,
here
can
that
you
I
let-
really thought we were gonna finally get a chance to sink our teeth into.
All right.
now that,
Well, you are. You're sinking your teeth right in. So can we let the applicant respond? Thank you.
So there are tests.
I can keep going.
No, let's let the applicant respond first, Frank, before you continue.
There were test pits dug out where we were doing the stormwater ponds. Those test pits do have topography. It's right on the plan. It's all reference to that topography. And then in the Tidewater report, they suggested additional test pits. But instead of doing test pits, we lined the pond so that we don't have to do additional test pits there, because that was the other option. And so now we have the DEP approval, so it doesn't matter anymore. And so we don't have to do that because we're not infiltrating it into the ground. So that's a moot point. The second answer is we have had a site evaluator. His name is Mike Cuomo. He's well respected in Maine, and he has done 4 test pits all across the top. They're shown on the plans. And he also has already designed the septic system for a full replacement for the existing building and for the new proposed building, and that's already approved. And we have it shown on the plans, and we also have a pump station or a pump and a tank on the plans that will pump up to that system. So everything's on the plans.
On the plan, Mike, you show a designated proposed septic area.
Right.
You see none of the details. If that stuff is done, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's
I have
all
a
done.
permit for it.
It's not shown on the plan or even
Well,
indicated.
It's
I-
all
I-
permitted.
What I'm a little confused with too is, you know, we're talking about a holding tank to contain everything coming out of the building, the cultivation building.
Yeah, that's just the water.
From a process side.
Yeah.
And the people from the Maine DEP Water Bureau want to make sure that the floor drains are going into that. We have
Yep.
no idea what the piping configuration is in and around that building and how it's going into whether the holding tank or whether it's going into the septic tank with the pump system. And then when you get over to the proposed leach field area, I mean, you got no idea of how it all is gonna work, because you're gonna have to upgrade the leach field because you got a failed system serving 3 houses. And I thought somewhere in here that residence was gonna change to 5 units. maybe I'm wrong, I thought I read that months ago. But the point is, that there just needs to be some kind of a semblance from a piping perspective as to where all this water is going. We're concerned about water in. You heard Paul speak on the other project. We're concerned about water in, and we're also concerned about water out. And to tell you the truth, I'm at a point where I think we ought to do a hydrogeologic study on this thing and actually map the groundwater. And I'll tell you, this would not be the first time this has been put on a conditional use as a condition. We did it when a person wanted to put a stump grinding and clean construction grinding operation and near an aquifer, the largest aquifer in town. And we imposed on him the condition that he had to perform a hydrogeo, at least map the groundwater, have an up-gradient well and a down-gradient well so that we could prove that there was no impact coming off of that site impacting the abutters' wells or aquifer. So, I mean, that's one of the conditions I want to put in here, that a hydrogeologic study be performed. I mean, the board can put it in or they can not put it in, but I think we need to in light of how flexible this water table is, how shallow it is, the aquifer extension, and the fact that we're trying to work with, according to the comprehensive plan, our neighboring towns to make sure we're serving it in the best interest of all. So, I mean,
Absolutely, and we got a letter from South Berwick's Water District with their suggestions and we put them into our conditions. So, do you have anything to say about any of those, please?
I just, with all due respect, we are adding 200 gallons per day for this facility. So the building is already on an existing well, the existing building there. So that's the amount of water we're adding. As far as the piping goes, that's not, the piping in the internal building is never shown on a site plan, and you know that. I show the piping coming to the building, both from the holding tank, and I state in the letter that I wrote that all floor drains and all discharge from the process will go into that holding tank and it will be tested. And we agree to all of that testing. And that holding tank is not going that holding tank does not get pumped to the septic system. And it states that right in the letter that I already wrote. The only thing that goes to the septic system is the restroom, and I don't know if there's a small kitchenette or something like that, but the flow down from this facility is, from a sewage standpoint, is minimal. That's been taken into account by Mike Cuomo. As I understand it, the HHE or that process and that, I'm not a licensed septic designer in the state of Maine. I'm a professional engineer, so I can't do the smaller systems, but Mike, I work with all the time, and that system has been fully designed, and I represent that outline of his system on my plan, and that's what I show there, because his plan details how that system is built, as you typically know on that, and then I've set up my pump system to go up to that exact system up there. So if you really look at the plans and everything that's in there, it's all there, and it's all been there all along.
And reviewed by a third party.
Yeah, and we've had a third-party review on that also, Frank.
but you know, Mike implied that I should know what a site plan, and I know what a site plan should show, and I know what an architectural and a building plan should show. It should show the piping coming out at least 5 feet from the building on the architectural plan, if you were gonna go that. And it should show how all those stubs sticking out are picked up on the site plan.
Okay,
You've got 1 liter coming out.
Okay, we have our code enforcement officer would like to speak now. Thank you, Jen.
Hi, Frank. Can you hear me?
What's that?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay.
You hear me?
I can. So, just for those who don't know, I'm the code enforcement officer for the town of Berwick. So, the septic design for this property has already been approved by us. We reviewed it and there's nothing wrong with it. So, the amount of sewage that's going to go into it is not a problem. Exactly what the engineer is telling you is correct. That design has already been approved. It's already been...
That's fine. I can check that off.
Sounds good.
I didn't know that until I just heard it right now.
Yep, and then the well situation, as you know, it has nothing to do with code enforcement with this. So Okay?
I mean, yeah, and then my whole effort here with the questioning and that I was gonna continue with was that I heard an abutter say that we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And I wanted to go through a level of questioning here to show that the level to which the planning board has put into this thing shows that we have gone from a site plan with 9 trees to a landscape plan that shows 113 plantings and substantial buffering. We're showing a building that is aesthetically pleasing, and we've had it referred to as looking like a barn, which is perfectly compatible with the Dunn farm and everything else. So I was trying to go through a line of questioning to prove to the abutters that we heard them. We have empathy for them. The town's attorney has said we have to act on the ordinance, the land use ordinance and the conditions, and I'm prepared to vote in favor of this thing, all right, to tell you the truth. But I just wanted to make sure we have touched all the bases for the last 6 months where we've had conscientious people come in. As a matter of fact, I hope they volunteer to go on the master plan committee because we're reviewing it now. You know, we could use some extra people. When we did the original one, we had 70 people that were truly committed to the process. So I just wanted to make sure that we did look at the comp plan.
Yeah, and I think that going through,
We did take guidance from the public.
and I think that when we go through,
Residents, let me just finish.
okay,
right
sorry.
now. We've included residents' conditions right in there from their list. I've never seen that happen, but we took all of them, just pretty much all of them, and put them in there. We took the water districts and put it right in there. If you look at our, Karen Forbes, the attorney, she sent us all the findings of facts that we've done in the past. We've had one condition on all of those, okay? Now we've got another one because we want sampling. We got 11 proposed on this, and I want to add 3 more. I just want to make sure that the town has done the proper thing here to allow this use, which is a conditional use subject to restrictions, to go in there.
I agree, and I thought that going through each of the findings of fact would prove that, because we can discuss each one, which are the performance standards for this.
But I don't need 3 or 4 different attorneys writing letters to the planning board, or implying that we did a wrong vote.
I agree.
Or implying that we did not publicly make ourselves aware by, they wanted us to offer an affirmative that we watched the meetings.
Oh yeah, which you cannot
I don't
require.
need that. We are a very responsible board here.
I agree.
I just wanted to go through this little exercise to prove to the public that we heard them, and we're weighing their input, and we're gonna put this thing out as an approved use in this district, because by the comprehensive plan, it's allowed in this district, subject to conditions. Enough said.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mike LaRue? You're on mute.
No, I'm here.
Okay. So I'd like to go through each of the findings of fact, and I think that will also show that we have taken a lot of this into account, or everybody's letters and statements into account. So the first finding of fact, and these are the performance standards with which everything is, every application is judged on, and this is our duty, our role and responsibility. So the first finding of fact is conformance with the comprehensive plan. All proposed conditional uses and site plans shall conform to the comprehensive plan of the town of Berwick and with the provisions of all pertinent federal, state, and local codes, ordinances, and regulations. And as our attorney stated, the application conforms to the comprehensive plan because it is a permitted commercial use within the RCI zone, and it meets all pertinent federal, state, local codes, ordinances, and regulations. I asked this morning of her, because we did have a lengthy conversation regarding this application. I was telling her that my feeling on this was that the intent of the planning board, when we made the decision to limit medical marijuana production facilities to the RCI district, the intent was because that's an industrial area and we didn't want it near residences. That was our intent. And I explained that to her, and she said, you know, things like this happen all the time. And sometimes there's a small residential area that's stuck into the RCI zone. And that, as she said earlier, this is a zoning issue, and it should have been addressed by zone, not by the actual application. But does anybody have anything else to say about that finding of fact? David Ross Lyons?
Can you just clarify that it was just you two and James on that call
Yes, it was
today?
just James, me, and the attorney, because we knew that I'd be running this meeting and I had some questions.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Mike LaRue, Frank, either of you have anything else to say about that finding?
I have a comment.
Yes.
You know, where we specifically know that this is a marijuana cultivation facility, I would take after commercial, I would put comma specifically, because that's the C in the box we're looking at. In the past, we've generally used commercial or whatever, professional, retail, but now we know what this specifically is per our land use table. Should we just specifically call it out as a marijuana cultivation?
Yep.
Not leave it generally commercial?
So, straw vote, we're all in agreement with this in agreement with this finding of fact, although we do not need to be all in agreement with it, a majority.
Yes.
Yes.
Are we gonna add that little?
Yes, James is adding that right now.
Yeah, and I'll add that ongoing to specify. That's a good
Yeah,
addition.
Good
that is good.
clarification.
Thank you.
So the second finding of fact is preserve and enhance the landscape. The landscape shall be preserved in its natural state insofar as practicable by minimizing tree removal, disturbance of soil, retaining existing vegetation during construction. After construction is complete, landscape shall be designed and planted that will define, soften, or screen the appearance of off-street parking areas from the right-of-way and abutting properties and/or structures in order to enhance the physical design of the building or site and to minimize the encroachment of the proposed use on the neighboring land uses. And the finding on this was that no trees are proposed to be removed during construction. The applicant has proposed a landscape buffer to screen the buildings from the neighboring property. And the buffer included a berm too, from what I remember from the drawing, right? Yeah. And Frank counted 113 plantings.
Oh, I think the berm went away. The berm was at one time, and then I think what they did is they moved the building back to allow the road, and they did away with the berm. Am I correct, Mike?
Pretty sure we still have the berm.
Pretty sure we still have the berm.
Not a very big berm.
No, it's just like a 3-foot berm.
Just a 3-foot berm, but I know that renderings were provided that actually showed the elevation from the neighbor's property also to show that it would screen that, which I've never seen before. I think that was a first for the Berwick Planning Board.
I want to make sure the Woodburn Company landscape plan is included, because that has a detailed schedule of 113 plantings, of which it specifically says how high they are. And I think that's the shielding aspect.
Yes, we will.
Landscape plan.
We'll.
It's part of it.
Yeah, that's part of the plan, and we'll make sure that it's noted. So, Mike LaRue, are you good with that finding?
Yes.
David? Okay. So the third finding of fact, the relationship of the proposed buildings to the environment. Proposed structures shall be related harmoniously to the terrain and to the existing buildings in the vicinity, which have a visual relationship to the proposed buildings. Special attention shall be paid to the bulk, location, and height of the buildings and such natural features such as slope, soil type, and drainage ways. And the finding is that the proposed buildings are 1 story, and that is a condition of our approval, with pitched roofs and are designed to resemble a barn.
When do we add the fence detail in? Should we say we want surrounded by an equestrian type fence that would retain horses? You know, I just don't think that welded wire 4-foot high metal fence, it's gonna look like not good.
That was more of a security thing, I think, than
aesthetics, but
It's
I'd rather put a
4 foot
paddock.
fence is security? I don't think so.
Come on up. I'm selling a horse property right now with a very similar fence, so I don't know.
That was more of a security, because there's gonna be one strand of barbed wire on top of it, and I'd like to see you jump over a 4-foot wide fence with
Yeah, but I
posts
want it to
and-
look like a detention camp.
Believe me, I'll build a paddock fence there, you say the word.
Farm features.
Okay.
It's more of a security thing.
So a paddock style fence, does that sound good?
Is that what you want? I'd rather put that in, look a lot nicer.
Yeah.
I would like to ask the abutters if we could see. if
Well,
one
this
of
is,
them
we
will
are,
offer
we are
comment.
beyond,
We're
we are,
beyond that.
we're beyond ask.
Backyard, nice
You
whitewashed
should have chimed in a month ago, Frank, or
Yes,
2 months ago.
we are beyond asking the abutters for their preference, but I do,
I realize that.
okay. I do, I mean, if we add paddock style fencing into the findings, are you good with that, David? Mike LaRue?
That's 6 feet, right, or whatever.
The paddock fence is only gonna be 4 feet high, and it's gonna be 2 rails. I mean, you know,
But it looks like a paddock fence,
Yeah.
yeah. So if it's aesthetically pleasing,
Question is, how secure is that?
I think the
not secure.
lion's share of the security system should be within and on the building itself.
I'm good with that. You guys, tell me what you want.
I mean, I don't know about it. I mean, double deadbolts, motion detection inside the building. I don't know any of that stuff.
I don't know.
Noah's gonna live in the apartment, and he's a real good shot. How's that? That a good security? Oh.
I guess so.
Which fence?
well, I mean, for security reasons, I think a 4-foot fence with barbed wire on top of it makes sense. If you could make it look like compatible with a horse property, that would be wonderful.
Like the
Jen,
Bengals fence?
Jen can be the one that weighs in on that when you go for your CO.
You know what I'm gonna tell you, do your research.
Right.
I think,
Well,
but.
do it,
We'll talk
do it
about
like
it.
a horse paddock, put an electric wire on the top of it. That's what keeps the horse away from it.
Well, though, yeah, but the barbed wire or electrified wire is what keeps
But
the
kids shouldn't be,
horses
over there playing.
Okay,
Anyway.
we are moving on with the findings of
They do
fact.
play.
Oh,
And I have
excuse
four
me.
grandchildren that play in the backyard.
Number 4, vehicular access. The proposed site layout shall provide for safe access and egress from public and private roads by providing adequate location, numbers, and controls of access points, including site distances, turning lanes, traffic signalization, when required by existing and projected traffic flow on municipal road systems. And the finding is that the site layout provides for safe access and egress to Pond Road. Need to make that an uppercase P. Trucks will pick up products at approximately 2 or 4 times a month. There will be 5 full-time employees and 8 during harvesting. This will be the extent of the traffic during operations. And that has been confirmed by the applicant. David Ross Lyons? Frank?
I have a question.
Sure.
If you look at C1, the drawing, they widened the entryway of the driveway coming in to 20 feet. Obviously, the 20 feet was a requirement of our fire chief,
Correct.
but it's on the abutter's property.
No, it's on my property.
It's not on the abutter's property.
Well, isn't that a property line that comes down there?
I'm moving it in towards my property line, not the other direction. Going towards the house.
When I first looked at it, it looked like it was, the triangular wedge of that thing was on the abutting property, but if that's your property, then it's not a problem. If it isn't your property, you need to have some kind of permission to use it.
There's an easement, Frank, there's an easement on there, and the existing driveway, I think, is slightly over, and we're widening it onto David's property for the 20 feet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike LaRue, you good? Oh, sorry, Mike LaRue, sorry, you're taking a drink. Yes, good.
No, I'm good. It's okay.
Number 5, parking and circulation. The layout and design of all vehicular and pedestrian circulation, including walkways, interior drives, and parking areas, shall provide for safe, general, interior circulation, separation of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, service traffic, loading areas and arrangements, and use of parking areas. And the finding is that 2-way traffic is proposed for the interior of the site. Parking is proposed to go in front of the first building. Access is provided around the proposed building, and access to the front and right side of the proposed expansion comes from the interior road. And the Berwick Fire Chief and Police have both reviewed and signed off on that for safety. David, anything? You're good?
Good.
Frank?
And this is gravel, correct? Compacted gravel?
I believe it is gravel, correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's gravel. Mike?
I'm good.
All right. Finding number 6, surface water drainage. Adequate provision shall be made for surface drainage so that the removal of surface waters will not adversely affect neighboring properties, downstream conditions, soil erosion, or the public storm drainage system. Whenever possible, on-site absorption of unpolluted runoff water shall be utilized to permit groundwater recharge on the site. A bioretention basin with swale heading to the basin is proposed for surface water. A swale is proposed along the proposed new interior road, and we learned that the retention ponds will be lined also, and there has been a DEP permit issued. Frank, you're good?
You asking me?
Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm confused. Do we have a bioretention basin, or do we have a grass-lined biofilter? Because the detail on the drawing from one to the other has changed.
Okay.
So we keep calling it a bioretention basin, but it's presented as a grass infiltration with an underdrain system. So what do we actually have on this site?
So it is the
So
grass.
It is, Frank, it is it started as a bioretention facility, but then with some of the comments and the water table, we've changed it to the grass-lined basin.
I just need to make sure all of our terminology and everything is correct, because I know you
Yes.
did go down the road of looking at both of them.
Yes, we did, and this,
Make sure we're clear, and
Yeah.
globally changed everything to say it's a grass line infiltration.
yes. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Can you just
You're
make
right.
sure that's changed
Yep.
in the findings?
Yep.
Thank you. Everybody good with that? David? Mike? All right. Number 7, existing utilities. The development shall not impose an unreasonable burden on sewers, sanitary and storm drains, water lines, or other public utilities. The finding is that concerns with South Berwick's water quality and water availability were raised by the district superintendent. Conditions of approval have been added to ensure this standard will be met. Frank?
Question?
Yes.
I realize it's not a direct connection to any of these utilities, okay? However, the holding tank waste and the septic waste are going to be pumped and discharged somewhere. We do have fortunate to have 2 facilities, South Berwick and the Berwick Sewer District, that accept these wastes. I know that holding tank pumpings and septic tank pumpings are all logged in by the hauler. They have the provision to sample all of those. And I guess I just want to make sure that even though we don't have hard pipe connections to these things, we are impacting municipal facilities. And nutrients are a big issue if you've been following the Great Bay Estuary over the last 10 years. So I just want to make sure if we need to supplement something in there that talks about will meet the rules and regulations of the discharge receiving facility, whether it be South Berwick, or elsewhere. Just want to make sure that we're not impacting them by dumping an excessive nutrient load into their plant, which can cause a major upset.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's something that we would put in our findings of fact. I imagine that those facilities have their own standards before accepting these things, don't they?
And maybe it can go into the actual conditions when you start going down through there, when we're making reference of testing and results for priority of pollutants and things like that. We can
Okay.
add maybe a sentence in there. I looked at doing it in that location.
I think that's fair. Okay. Mike LaRue, are you good?
Yep.
David, yes? Okay. Number 8, advertising features. The size, location, design, lighting, and materials of all exterior signs and outdoor advertising structures or features shall not detract from the design of proposed buildings and structures and the surrounding properties. And no signage has been proposed for this project And if any signage does come up, that would be under the code office. Everybody good with that? Since there's no sign, great.
No question.
Excellent. Number 9, special features of the development. Exposed storage areas, exposed machinery installations, service areas, truck loading areas, utility buildings, and similar structures shall have sufficient setback and screening to provide an audio-visual buffer to minimize their adverse impact on other land uses within the development area and surrounding properties. And we have found that not applicable because there is no major unloading, loading that would cause audio or visual disturbances.
And the dumpster is screened and it's gonna be picked up by a private hauler, is that correct?
I believe so. Yes, it is. Yep. Mike LaRue, questions?
Nope.
Nope. David? No. 10, exterior lighting. All exterior lighting shall be designed to minimize adverse impact on neighboring properties. And the finding is that lighting is proposed to be mounted to the building and have a shield to direct the light downward, which is one of those great things that code enforcement gets called on constantly. So I know that she'll be enforcing that. And the details were included on the plan. Any questions?
Nope.
David? No? Number 11, emergency vehicle access. Provisions shall be made for providing and maintaining convenient and safe emergency vehicle access to all buildings and structures. The finding is that the driveway will be widened to 20 feet as requested by the Berwick Fire Department, and the interior access road is also 20 feet wide. I know that the Berwick Fire Chief and the Police Chief have both signed off on this. They're comfortable with it. Frank, any questions for you?
And the Knox box is the system by which they're gonna be allowed to get in there with their emergency vehicles, is that correct?
Yes. Mike LaRue?
I'm good.
David?
Good.
Number 12, Municipal Services. The development will not have an unreasonable adverse impact on the municipal services, including municipal road systems, fire department, police department, solid waste program, sewer treatment plant, school, open spaces, recreation programs and facilities, and other municipal service and facilities. The finding is that concerns with South Berwick's water quality and water availability have been raised by the district superintendent. Conditions of approval have been added to ensure this standard will be met. Frank?
I'm okay once we get to the conditions.
Right. Mike?
I'm good.
David?
I'm good.
13, will not result in water or air pollution. In making this determination, it shall at a minimum consider the elevation of land above sea level and its relationship to the floodplains, the nature of soils and subsoils and their availability to adequately support waste disposal, the slope of the land and its attest on effluents, and the applicable state and local health and water resources regulations. And the finding is that the primary contamination risk of cultivation is a concentration of nitrates in the water. A holding tank is proposed to capture wastewater from cultivation. The water is required to be tested annually. Frank?
And per Mary Beth Richardson's note there, does this include the under drains, the floor drains?
Well, this is the floor drains will drain into this containment tank.
I realize that, but she questioned that, and I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah, well, I'll edit.
Okay.
Any washdown water or any discharge water from the cultivation, anything that goes on that floor from the process side goes through the holding tank.
Okay, yep, we will clarify that in the findings.
Thank you.
Mike?
Good.
David?
I'm good.
Number 14, has sufficient water available for the reasonable foreseeable needs of the development. This is usually considered to be 10 years approximately, and it was found that this standard has been met. Frank?
My concern is that, I know we started out with 4 buildings. We're talking about 2 buildings. We're going to require that we do the 5-day drawdown. We're going to measure impacts on surrounding wells or any piezometers that get put in to track and help determine the drawdown influence from the well. My big concern, and I think I'll raise it here, because on the drawing, we do show a second building, a future building. And I'm of the opinion that we are looking at a unique application here. We are looking at an application for one particular building right now. We are saying that if they're coming back for a second building, they need to resolve the septic issue or they need to come back to the planning board. My druthers is to not even show the dashed line on these plans of a second building. I don't want to come across that the planning board has given some kind of standing to this project going forward with a second building. My druthers are is that we ask the applicant to remove the dashed line so that we are clearly dealing with only one building.
Just to let you know, the application that was given to code for these buildings, there are 2 buildings listed on the application, just to make you guys aware.
Okay, but that's not what we're approving right now.
I'm just telling you.
Okay.
That's
We're
the
approving this
application
use,
that
and I don't think we should be indicating that we've even considered a second building. So let's just take it right off the drawing.
Yeah, I think that a condition of approval would be any addition or any additional buildings beyond this first building come back before the planning board, and I'd like to make that a condition. It would be an amendment to the site plan. And I'm in favor of removing that second building off of this plan that's recorded.
Especially when there's a conflict with the sewer easements and this, that, and the other. Let them resolve that. My understanding is they have other court actions they could take to resolve that, or they could come up with a memorandum of understanding between the parties. I think that needs to all be worked out if a building in the future is gonna be sited over that area of the applicant's land.
We object to any kind of conditions on the future. We're gonna have to meet the code then, or whatever the current would be to expand.
I appreciate your objection, but this is pretty standard for our planning board. It would be a phase. It would be a phased. It'd be a second phase, and that's
Yeah, I mean,
that's
We'll
how
be
we do it.
subject to any rules or regulations that have been resolved through the town and voted successfully for the town.
Correct. Yeah.
so it'd be at the point
And
of,
the other thing is too, is maybe the attorney can answer this. I was concerned about the licensing. I'm going in the weeds a little bit. The licensing from the state and the local, and maybe someday the federal government's gonna get involved in this kind of a practice if it's ever recognized. That being said, are those licenses subject to additional conditions added to them coming down from the state or from the local? So that every year, if these are renewed annually, do we have another look-see at these licensings to see if there's something else we need to add into it or to take away from it or to
Okay.
modify?
Let's let Mary.
I understand how the
Okay.
licensing is.
Let's
going
let our
on.
attorney address that. Thank you, Mary.
Sure, yeah, the licensing, at the state level, and I apologize, I don't know if Berwick also has a separate licensing program, I'm not familiar. But those are not related to the planning board. So it would not come back to you for any type of review.
But for example, if it's a license that's issued, I have a driver's license. And all of a sudden I go in there, I'm old enough now and I don't pass the eye test. They impose a corrective lens on my driver's license. They can do that. Does licensing allow that authority, whoever is issuing the license, to render additional restrictions or conditions or?
we have local licenses that the select board can impose conditions, and the recommendation to the select board comes through the planning department.
And I don't think we need to necessarily resolve it. I just want an understanding, do we have another bite at this thing every time the licensing comes around? If rules and regulations and things are changing.
It's really hard
It
to,
would only only come to you if they had to make a change to their plan in order to comply with a license condition.
Okay, so it would be driven by that licensing
Yeah.
provision that would require them to come back, okay?
Correct. Yep.
I'm not sure how we tie that into all of these conditions of approval, but I want to be
I
sure.
don't
it
think
comes
you
back.
have to. I think that it'll just be driven by the license.
Okay.
Thank
I'm
you.
assuming the licensing has a revocation provision in it too.
Yep,
You know, if you're a felon or something like that.
yep.
Both state and local.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Frank. David or Mike, anything?
Just the same, the second building,
Okay.
needs to come off those plans.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah, and that's consistent with decisions that we've made in the past. Number 15, will not cause soil erosion or reduction in the capacity of the land to hold water so that dangerous or unhealthy conditions may result. And it was found that no soil erosion issues have been identified. I think we can all agree with that. Number 16, will provide for adequate sewage waste disposal. The finding is that a new septic system has been designed and included with the application, and that has been approved by the state. So that has been found. No questions on that, right, Frank? I think we talked a lot about that.
Did I read somewhere that it was 5 residential units? Am I correct on that? Or I know it says 3 on the tax assessors documents in their file. It says 3 families.
Okay, it says the engineer is saying 3 families.
So,
It's only 3.
at one time it was gonna be
Designed to
expanded.
serve both that house and in the building.
Yeah, at one time they were going to expand, but they're no longer going to do that.
And that's only the domestic flows on that side, the users flows.
Correct. Number 17, will not have adverse effects on the scenic or natural beauty of the area, aesthetics, or rare and irreplaceable area. The area has a large garage, barn, and horses around it. Any other clarification that you'd like to put
Houses.
about the, houses. It has horses
And
too.
horses.
No, they're gone.
Okay.
Well, that's-
18, whenever situated in whole or in part within 250 feet of any pond, lake, or river, will not adversely affect the quality of such body of water or affect the shoreline of such body of water based on the standards outlined in section 9.8.I.1.J. The finding is the Bioretention Basin, which we are going to rename the
Filter.
grassline basin, is proposed to be constructed within 250 feet, within the 250-foot wetland buffer. Part of the interior driveway is also within the 250-foot wetland buffer. The stormwater system has received a stormwater permit by rule. Number 19, low impact design.
Just one question on that.
Yeah.
I thought I read in there, when they were defining the subcatchments and stuff, that there was one section of runoff that did not go through the treatment bioremediation system. Is that true, or does all the water go through there? It seems to me there was one side that did not go through the swale and went through the pond.
Okay, we will have the engineer address that.
So that was in the original one. We were letting the far side away from the road, that side go before that access road went all the way around. That was going outside of it. Now we've brought it back around the other way so that all the areas go through the grass treatment swale.
So that's what they were saying. It didn't impact the sizing of any pipes or anything, and the HydroCAD model, necessarily, it didn't have to be rerun to address that change.
No, we did rerun it.
You did rerun.
Yeah, we reran it, and then we redesigned this new basin, and brought additional water into it from the building, from the other side of the building. So now it all goes.
Why do we pick a 25-year storm? That was the other question I had.
That's what we designed to. 2, 10, and 25 usually is what we designed to. So I didn't see anything that specified it, so I just did that whole run.
Okay, thank you. Number 19, low impact design. Each applicant is required to submit a statement to the planning board documenting proposed low impact design for the site, which will help to reduce stormwater volumes and help to enhance stormwater quality. Low impact design includes, but is not limited to, green roofs, rain gardens, tree wells, infiltration basins, and permeable pavement. And the finding is that a grass-lined basin, we're going to update that, and swales are proposed as part of the LID improvements on the project.
Is a solar system considered an LID?
I think it would be, but that's just that's a future thing. They don't have that as part of their actual application. It was just on the rendering. So the grassline basin is sufficient for their lid requirement. Okay. Those are our findings of fact. I need to recognize David as a voting member first, and then Jen, go ahead.
Before you vote, I just want to make it clear that if they change their fence design, if they change their fence design, and it was on their security plan, they will need to update that with the PD.
Okay.
Yep, and the dumpster should say on any paperwork that you have that it will remain locked at all times.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Can we make that, do you want to put that as a condition?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so.
To get CO, it will be required.
So maybe to keep it simple, why don't we consider like a 6-foot or an 8-foot stockade fence? Wouldn't that be more secure than
Around what?
around the property? Or at least around the direct abutters property, and then
So get rid of the berm and put a fence up? If you put a fence up, you're not gonna see the berm with the plantings.
So
Pick which one you
I'm
want.
talking on her direct. Okay, well, we can keep it. It's really, I guess, it's a balance
I'm letting them choose between a paddock fence or a security fence.
So the fence that I showed you when everyone was talking about the fact finding is a paddock fence with a electric fence feature. You should look into that. See if you like it. Just stating.
I just think it gives that aesthetic appeal of the farmland there.
I agree.
That's what you guys want, that's what I'll do, but not stockade and then chain link and then,
No, check into the paddock with the electric. It looks like it's pretty reasonable and it would serve your purpose.
I know you're enclosing the entire site. On the back side there, is there anybody that visually would be looking at it? It's all woods. I think it's mostly wet, and nothing's ever gonna be built back there, maybe.
Okay.
You wanna transition the fence at some point? It's the aesthetic value, and where do you?
Just do the paddock around the whole thing with electric, I'm good with
Yep,
that.
the paddock around the whole site with the electric. I think that would look good and it would serve the purpose. Just make sure that the Berwick Police Chief gets the updated security.
I'd like a drone film of that when you get it all done.
How about this sliding security gate, what do we do with that?
Okay, that's enough, everybody. So I have recognized David Ross Lyons as a voting member, and having gone through each of the findings of fact, we would, yes?
I just have one more. The condition of approval is that when you guys are ready for phase 2, you come back to planning board.
Yes, I have that. We'll talk about the conditions after this, yeah.
Right.
So I need a motion to approve the findings of fact that we just very thoroughly went through.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, do you mind if I remind you of one other thing?
Please, Mary.
My understanding is that there perhaps are some voting members who have not been at every meeting, and before they vote, is that true?
That is true, yes.
Before they vote, I recommend they go on the record to make it clear that they have reviewed all the materials, even though they were not present at all the meetings.
Absolutely, yes. So Mike LaRue, I know, was not present at all the meetings.
Yep, I've gone through all of it.
Okay, Frank, have you
I've
had?
gone through all of it. As a matter of fact, I was prepared to speak to that issue. So.
Good.
But apparently I'm not going to be allowed. So.
Okay, thank you. You can talk at the end. David?
I was actually present at all of them.
I don't know if I was present at all of them, but I have reviewed everything twice. So thank you. And thank you, Mary, for bringing that up. I thought that was important also. So I do need a motion to approve the findings of fact
I move that we approve the findings of fact as amended.
Thank you, Mike LaRue. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
David Ross Lyons, second. Further discussion about the findings of fact? Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote. Mike LaRue,
Yes.
Frank Underwood,
I will say, yes. I told at
Thank
the
you.
outset I would support this application. I feel we've had adequate opportunity to get a lot of these questions put out there, addressed and answered. I still have probably a few more questions, but I think the lion's share and the bulk of them has been addressed. I'm waiting for the conditions of use primarily.
yes, so am I. So Frank votes yes. Thank you, David.
Yes.
And I vote yes on the findings of fact. Now we're going to review the conditions of approval. And these are the conditions that we put on the plan, that are recorded with the plan, that are basically that we've used all of your input and attorney input and water district input to find these conditions. And we will go through them and discuss them and amend them and add to them as we find necessary. So the first condition of approval is a water sample shall be tested for priority pollutants and nutrients before any cultivation wastewater is discharged to a holding tank, and then tested annually thereafter. Results shall be provided to the town and South Berwick Water District. Frank, do you have any input on that one?
Yeah, I think this is where we also make sure we inform our local wastewater treatment plants.
Okay, so maybe results shall be provided to
Also the Berwick Sewer District, the South Berwick Sewer District.
There's no sewer.
And then I would also add that
Because those are the
holding tank
dumping stations.
pump records shall be submitted to the CEO with the lab results.
Okay, so
They're going to require pumping records every time they take a load off-site to go somewhere. I just want a copy of those records for the code officer, so we can monitor this thing at the outset. Maybe we relinquish this down the road in the future, but I really want to understand what's going into the tanks, where it's going and how it's handled.
okay, and so since we don't know if it's going to Berwick or South Berwick sewer, I mean, would there be somewhere else that it would be taken?
They usually take it wherever it's the cheapest.
Okay. Okay, so so let's add those, all of those that Frank just mentioned as recipients of test results, which should be fairly easy, just a matter of making a copy.
And a schedule of pumpings for the holding tank as well.
Okay.
No, in the pumping records, and that should give you an indication of where the discharge went.
Yep.
And it would tell you who pumped it.
David, do you have anything further? Mike LaRue, anything further to add to that?
The one thing I have a question about is the testing annually. What if they don't discharge in a year? Let's say they don't fill up the tank in a year and they don't have, could we set it up so it's almost every discharge?
I think the idea was the priority pollutant one is the one that's tested annually. I mean, I think the nutrient loading, you're going to find wastewater treatment plants in the Great Bay Estuary area, they're going to want to know what's coming into their plant.
Right, that's why.
Typically, their rules and regulations could require them to get an industrial.
Mike, I know
permit.
what you're saying. I can write it in a way that whichever happens first.
Okay.
That makes sense.
I'm just saying, if they don't have much waste
Right.
runoff to test, like if they're not disposing, if they're holding it for a year, I mean, they're not disposing it, so then why should they get tested?
Yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense. So the second condition of approval will be the South Berwick Water District shall be furnished with a detailed well driller's log for the new well. Dave Ross Lyons?
I'm good.
Frank?
I'm good.
Mike LaRue?
I'm good.
Okay. Number 3, a 5-day pump test to be performed on the well with well drawdown readings taken hourly until the well stabilizes. The pump test will be coordinated with the South Berwick Water District and 386 Portland Street and 2, 10, and 13 Pond Road, so the well drawdowns at Junction Road and abutters wells can be monitored to check for interference. Frank?
I guess anywhere between this one and the last one, I would like to have a discussion about whether or not we're gonna require them to do a hydrogeologic survey whereby which we would end up with a groundwater map that would clearly depict the direction of flow should something impact the groundwater. And oftentimes, I mean, it's typically done with a landfill siting. They do that. They then determine whether you put in some permanent monitoring wells, you monitor the up gradient, you monitor the down gradient. And in part, oftentimes you do that to show that if there's a problem downstream, it might not come from you.
Right,
It could come
right.
from somewhere else. So I think it's a serious consideration where we're in this aquifer. Like I said, we held that as a condition on that waste facility, which was a stump grinding operation and clean construction debris. The reason we put that condition on them was because who knows what clean construction debris is when they come in and grind it. They're gonna grind anything that they run through the grinder. And that project ended up not going forward because they opted not to do that. But are we asking too much of the applicant to undertake that? We're requiring him to be responsible for any contaminants. Does he want to know whether those contaminants are his or somebody else's? I mean, there's farms around there.
Yeah.
There's golf courses around there. I mean,
Yeah, I'm more
fertilizers being used with nitrates.
Yeah, that's true.
Tank,
That's
though, and getting sucked off site, so nothing's
Yeah.
really going into the ground other than the tanks.
right.
So
No, but I understand what Frank's saying is that if the discharge does come up with high nitrates, it could be coming from the water from their well from neighboring farms, and a hydrogeologic survey would show that.
But I mean,
But again, that is way above and beyond what, I mean, save for the application that you're referring to, what we've required of other applicants.
I just think the conditions are kind of triangulating on on that without doing it. I mean, you're
Right.
you're testing what's in the holding tank.
You're testing
You're
everybody
doing
else
the
as
testing well, so.
The other thing is that my understanding is that they don't use that much water. Like, are they using as much as a house, or more than a typical household? Like, if somebody built a house right there, my understanding is that they wouldn't use that much water. They don't use that much water. But that's just my understanding.
somewhere, I'd like to be on record that the town at least posed this
Yep.
only to, and it's truly up to the applicant, I think. If we feel we've got enough belt and suspenders and whistles on this thing, then that's fine. But, I mean, I'd be curious as to whether the applicant would offer a comment on that condition if it were imposed on him. And I got a feeling I know what he's gonna say, but I'd be willing to hear him say something. Doesn't have to, if he doesn't want to, but.
We'll do what all the other growers do.
I just think that we are agreeing to the, when we drill the well, we're taking into account all that at the well at that 5-day pump down and then monitoring all the other wells there. So I think that is adequate based on our use. We're at 200 gallons per day. I think that's a house or so in here. I don't know the exact flows for the state of Maine as well as I do New Hampshire, but that's 200 gallons per day. And New Hampshire is less than a 2-bedroom house, and in Maine I think it's about a 2-bedroom house or maybe a 3-bedroom house.
I mean, typically when they do a drawdown test on a well, a larger well,
Yeah.
they also put piezometers in
Yeah.
the periphery. They look at this, if it were a municipal well, they would look at the radius around
Yes.
the well.
Yeah.
And they would put piezometers in just so that they could get a true read. And it's the piezometers
Yeah.
that really are gonna give you the stabilization of the well on the 5-day test.
Right.
They're gonna level out, it's gonna continue to pump, it's gonna equal out, and you're not gonna move anymore.
Yep, agreed.
So are you planning on adding a few piezometers in as part of this test? I mean, you only got wells on one side. To the north of this, should we put in a couple of piezometers, because you do have seasonal high water at 16 inches and again at 24 inches. I would think that whoever does that test, we should make sure they feel they have adequate piezometers and groundwater locations to prepare the proper drawdown test.
I think that's
As long as
okay.
it's
Okay,
Tied to the
that's,
drawdown
okay.
test.
And can we tie that to the drawdown, James?
Yep.
Thank you. Number 4, condition of approval. The facility may not irrigate their plants. Excuse me, if we could, or whoever's talking, if you could just not. The facility may not irrigate their plants if the new well has an adverse effect on the junction road water source or a butter's water source. That makes sense. That's the whole point of number 3. Number 5, a water meter shall be installed to monitor the water usage from the well, and permission shall be granted to the South Berwick Water District to periodically read the water meter to verify usage. I think that came directly from an abutter.
And I would like,
Yep, go ahead.
I'd like to expand that one a little bit.
Okay.
Because the abutter did raise an issue.
Yep.
And oftentimes you have backflow prevention techniques that have to be imposed, bypass around them so that you're not losing water, but it's a tagged system.
Yeah.
So I would like to indicate that the bypass piping and valving be tagged with security tagging.
Okay.
It's just like the meter on your electric box on your house.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They'll know whether or not you took the tag off and pulled the meter out and ran your, electricity.
Sure.
The idea is that it should address, I believe it was Mr. Grable that brought that up.
Yep.
I think we need to indicate that the bypass must be secured with security tagging system.
James, can you make that amendment? Thank you. Number 6, the applicant shall install and submit proof of purchase of carbon filtration and the equipment required to produce a negative pressure environment. That's part of the code anyway for that.
But I'd like to add something to that one too.
Okay.
Again, I believe it was Mr. Grable. I do believe that the submission of an engineered design should be part of that.
Okay.
And that would be standard from the manufacturer. They would have an engineering design for it, and it would indicate the supporting documentation for why they picked that equipment and what it's capable of doing.
Okay. Good, James? Yeah.
Yep.
Number 7, if an odor violation is determined by the code enforcement officer, the applicant shall resolve the issue within 5 days. The code enforcement officer may revoke the certificate of occupancy if the odor issues are not resolved within 5 days. Jen, you're good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay. And I think that was a balance that we came to between what was recommended and what the abutters requested. Number 8, if well water is contaminated with nitrates or other byproducts as a result of production beyond safe concentrations, the cost to remediate the nitrates or other contamination levels shall be at the applicant's, which is the property owner's, expense.
I'd like to add a word in there.
Yep.
If well water or groundwater
Okay.
is contaminated.
Okay.
Number 9, the building height shall be restricted to 1 story, and that is the height, the eave height we clarified earlier. Number 10, the septic, yeah,
Do we need to expand that a little bit, because what they're proposing out there is a shed type.
Yep.
8 foot on the front, 14 on the back, with
Yeah.
an eve height of 17, I believe is or a peak height of 17.
yeah.
Should we indicate that a shed type structure is acceptable to maintain the aesthetics of the surrounding buildings? Because it would look more like a barn if it was a shed type thing instead of just a cape.
Yeah, that's fine.
That would allow him to build the building he wants to, with a
Yeah.
8 foot front.
Right, and the,
14
yes,
foot
yeah,
back.
yeah. Did you get that,
Yep.
James? Okay. Number 10, the septic pipe easement shall be moved before the future expansion will be granted a building permit.
And I can change that language I have 10 and then 14 that were just tied to the phasing.
Okay, yeah,
This would be tied to when the easement's ready and you're ready to do building two, just come back to planning board.
I was gonna even keep it simpler than that, James, because I'm concerned about depicting futures, okay? The septic tank easement shall be addressed prior to any further building on the site, something like that. Just don't call it a phase 2 or a phase 3, but it needs to be addressed. Apparently there is an issue that goes back more than just the easement. I believe Mike identified that the easement that's recorded isn't the same one that's shown on the drawing. I mean, there's a big glitch in that thing, if I'm correct, Mike. That needs to be resolved before any further happening. And that's an issue between the applicant and the easement holder.
Right, yeah, that's not a planning board issue, that's
Right.
yeah.
Correct.
Number 11, oh, yes.
So could we not say the easement has to be resolved before any building on the site and limit it to a future building for this use? In other words, if my client wants to put an addition on the existing building up top that has no issues with the sewer easement as it is now, then he has that ability to do that.
I think the intention is for the phase 2, like an additional building.
Phase 2 grow building.
That's the intent, from my understanding.
I think most expansion of a building would be back to planning board, probably.
I think if you just take that dashed line off that overlays that septic easement, this whole question goes away. We know it's going to have to be dealt with in the future at some point in time if you do come back in.
Right.
But by showing it there, it's indicating that we could have a problem. I don't want to show that we got a problem. We may have a problem in the future when you want to add or build there, but let's deal with that in the future.
That's where the septic easement is shown based on the deed research. I don't want to remove that from the plan. So
No, I'm not saying remove that. I'm just saying your little 44 by 80 foot dashed line that's going around it.
the second
He does not want to
Take
see
that
that
off.
second building on that plan, yeah. Remove it.
Just take that off.
Sure.
Yeah.
That shows nothing being there, and you still got all the easement issues on recording and what's stated in the deed and all of that. So.
Okay, number 11, condition of approval is all pesticides and chemicals stored on site shall have a secondary containment. We all good with that? Number 12, processing in this application refers to processing the flower. No marijuana manufacturing has been approved as part of this project. I think that's nice clarification. Number 13, the dumpster shall remain locked at all times. And so do we want to make are you doing number 10 and number 14 the same? So 14 was, any additional buildings on this site need to come back before the planning board.
Yeah, that will become 10, and then
Okay.
the last one would be 14.
I would like to just ask our attorney on a condition regarding any licensing renewals on an annual basis or biannual or what. I have no idea what the licensing procedures are for these kinds of facilities, and it's probably going to be a moving target for a few more years at the state level. Should we be putting a condition in there that talks about licensing, or is it just automatically assumed that you will come in compliance with the rules and regulations in place at the time? I mean, do we need to add something in there to just emphasize it?
You don't need anything in this approval related to the licenses. There are enough regulations surrounding the licenses to make sure that that's complied with. And they will have to come to you if the license requires them to make a substantial change that will need an amendment.
And obviously that would include probably a hearing and the whole 9 yards. It would open up the whole.
It depends on the difference.
We have a local marijuana licensing ordinance, which requires them to come to the select board for a public hearing every year. And the select board can impose additional conditions. They can also revoke the license.
So should we put that as condition number?
No,
because
it's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance, yeah.
They have to come.
Doesn't fall into the planning board.
They can't operate if they don't have a license. Furthermore, the state of Maine won't issue a state of Maine license until they have a local license.
So I think that base is covered. Is there anything else, any other conditions? Mike LaRue,
I'm good.
David,
I'm good.
Frank?
I got reams of paper here.
Frank, we're talking about the conditions of approval. I'm sure you have reams of
I know
paper.
that, but we also had some people along the way that suggested we consider some conditions, like that Mary Beth Richardson.
Okay.
I think we did, but I guess, I think we've covered them all.
I really do. I've spent a lot of time on this, trying to be as thorough as possible.
Okay, so you convinced me now that I'm happy with the conditions, and I can act on this evening.
Thank you. So I would like to have a motion to approve the conditions of approval as amended.
I'll move that we approve the conditions of approval as amended.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
So moved by Mike LaRue, second by Dave Ross Lyons, and we are going to do a roll call vote on the conditions of approval. Michael LaRue?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I did not give the opportunity for further discussion. I feel like we've discussed it.
Yes, conditions as amended.
Yes, as amended, yes. So we have a yes from Mike LaRue. Frank?
Yes.
David Ross Lyons?
As amended, yes.
And I vote yes on the conditions as amended. So before we take our final vote on this application, I do want to say that before we were counseled by our attorney on our roles and responsibility as planning board members, I was absolutely not in favor of this. I know the intent of the planning board's decision on limiting medical marijuana to the RCI district was to put it in an industrial area. This is a residential parcel that slipped through the cracks. And I will say that up until I was refamiliarized with my roles and responsibilities to the town of Berwick, I was absolutely against it. And personally, I'm against it, but I'm not, I cannot vote personally on applications. I have to vote based on what I was tasked to do on the planning board, and that is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to allow, if any other members, I know that we've been here since February. We've had 18 letters from attorneys and abutters. We've had 3 public hearings. We've had 3 site walks. This is the most thorough we've ever seen any application. I would like my other members to be able to speak before we do our vote on this, just because I can. David?
Well, I also, like you, don't agree with this. I don't feel that this is a proper use for that lot. It is not well suited for that neighborhood. We are tasked with a responsibility of the planning board and the ordinances that are voted on by the residents of this town.
Thank you. Mike LaRue?
No, I'm good.
Frank?
I'd like to just say one thing, and James caught it and I caught it. It's that it's to minimize between conflicts with incompatible uses, not to minimize incompatible uses. One of the attorneys misspoke at the meeting that evening. James did catch it and correct it. And I think we've done a good job minimizing the conflicts for a use that's allowed in there as a condition with restrictions. The second thing I wanted to ask, is that attorney Karen Forbes that's representing the client at the meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Was your father Kerry Forbes?
That was my brother-in-law.
That's her brother-in-law.
An exceptional man,
Yeah, it
an
was.
exceptional developer. I will tell you, going through the history of the Berwick land use ordinance like the hokey pokey,
right.
we voted it in, we voted it out. We had the manufactured housing thing thrown in our face, which all we could do was have the fire chief weigh in on it. Kerry was very instrumental helping us and guide us through that. And when I saw the names Forbes, I just wanted to acknowledge him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. All right, so now I'm going to look for a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the applicant at 11 Pond Road.
I move that we approve the conditional use permit for 11 Pond Road,
And
Conditions.
subject to conditions as amended. And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. So it's moved by Mike LaRue, second by Frank Underwood. We are going to have a roll call vote. Mike LaRue,
Yes.
Frank Underwood,
Yes.
David Ross Lyons,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Thank you.
Just hope the sheriff doesn't show up after Labor Day with subpoenas.
Moving on to old business. We have a site plan amendment and expansion, medical marijuana storefront and adult use marijuana
Sorry, thank you.
production facility at 357 and 359 Portland Street. This is the Paper Birch property, which we had a public hearing for earlier. Excuse me, guys. Excuse me. All right, no, you okay, I did not see because I'm trying to conduct a meeting here.
I saw it, guys, I saw it. I've been hearing the whole thing. Let's just.
Okay, yeah, let's seriously, we need to get this meeting going. So we have the applicant here on Zoom, Jeff Oliva. Take it away.
Okay, well, thank you. Again, my name is Jeff Oliva. I'm here with Paul Venuti of Paper Birch Properties LLC. What we have here tonight is a site plan amendment, and it is to construct a 2,100 square foot building for a adult use retail space, and a 20,000 with expanded up to 25,000 square feet total of a growing facility. The project has a previous approval. We have our MDOT driveway permit, which has been updated for the proposed uses. We have our applications completed for DEP and stormwater. And what we're looking for tonight is review of the project with the board. What we would like to do is, knowing that the DEP process for the stormwater and our proposed wetland impact is going to take a while, that we would like to be able to move forward with the adult use building construction that is on the southern side of the property. That building is independent of the grow facility. It was thought about during the first original approval that was granted back 2 years ago. And what we have provided to James last week was a plan that indicated kind of a baseline of where and what we would have to do if that adult use building is built now. And basically what it is that building can be constructed, and that we're recommending that the level spreader that is off the edge of the existing parking lot be constructed, and then that would satisfy our drainage concerns for that portion of the project. As I mentioned, we have our DEP application for stormwater and for wetlands. The stormwater report has been provided to the town. It indicates that we reduce all of our flows for all the required storm events. And that really covers it on that side. But the thing I want to talk about is also the item that was triggered by the previous applicant with respect to the South Berwick Water District and some of their requests for water testing and water review for projects that are outside of the town of South Berwick and outside of their published aquifer maps. And I'd like to kind of discuss that with the board. If the board has questions for me as we move forward, The South Berwick Water District provided a letter today to you folks, the planning board, with some recommendations. As part of the overall build-out of this project, we are proposing to drill a new well. And that well would service the agricultural use of the building, the proposed larger building. The well that, and then we'd have another well that would service the 2 storefronts. The letter that came from the South Berwick Sewer District indicates that if we reuse the existing well on site, then we don't need to do any further testing. And there's no monitoring, there's no drawdown, there's no review, other than one of the questions was to provide secondary containment for any kind of pesticides or chemicals. And we don't have an issue with that, and that's perfectly acceptable for us. But the South Berwick Water District letter continues to say that if we drill another new well, then we have to do all this testing. And it's a little confusing to me because the uses would actually be the same for that aspect. And I think that we're far enough away. The Water District, when I met with them this morning, gave me a map that shows the edges, the location of the Junction Road well, and the extension of where their aquifer districts are delineated. I provided a copy and email to James this morning after I received that, which sketched on our site and indicates that our property, this property, with the grow facility is over 3,500 feet away from the well as the crow flies. And this property is over 1,000 feet, probably closer to 1,200 feet away from the edge of their delineated aquifer recharge area. So we feel that we're outside of that situation with respect to the
Thank you, James.
South Berwick. Yep, okay, thank you, James, for including this. So since we're talking about it, here is the map that was provided to me after I had a discussion with John Leach and had him come over to our office and take a look at it. So you can see what I've done is I've marked it up on there. I've indicated the distance from the project to the well, and then also the distance, the closest point from their aquifer modeling that crosses into Berwick to our proposed project is a little bit over 1,000 feet based on the scale of the map here. And we feel that we are far enough away, and then that we don't have a problem doing the secondary containment, and we don't have a problem doing the testing of any kind of irrigation water that we have going to our holding tanks. But it's the expense of a 5-day drawdown test for the information that we need to provide our water meter usage rate information to the South Berwick Water District when we're outside of their their impact area. And then I think that's about it. I hate doing these narratives. I'd rather answer questions and try to move forward that way with anybody, any of the board members.
First, James, did we vote this application as complete?
Yep.
We did, okay, perfect. That was procedurally, it's been a whirlwind 2 weeks here.
Yeah, and we did look at a couple of the waiver requests, and they were voted on at the last meeting too, I believe.
We granted those, I believe, yes.
It wasn't the last meeting.
Oh, it was the meeting before that, that's why I'm.
Meeting before that, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have a meeting the last one because of the lack of quorum.
Oh, right. Questions from the board? David?
Not yet.
No, Frank?
Yeah, Jeff, I went back and I looked at the Maine Geological Survey, significant sand and gravel aquifers, and their mapping, I believe, is similar to the cotton maps that they use in New Hampshire. It's a guide document to kind of outline where significant aquifers are. In particular, I looked at the open file 98-126, the 1998 It's the Lovers Brook, Perkins Brook, Adams Brook watershed.
Yep.
The map you just put up there had a South Berwick Water District title on it, but I didn't see down below who actually did that for them and what year that was done in, because obviously if it was done after this map was only usually done as an indicator that you should be looking at it in more detail.
That's right, yeah. That map that you have there is the main geological map is older. As I understand it, talking with John Leach this morning, is that is something that they're working with their engineers to get an idea, and that's White Pierce, to get an idea of where their kind of zones of influence are for their town water wells. So that's where that came from. So I think it's probably maybe the initial beginnings was using the older state geological maps, but I'm sure it came with more modeling that came from dealing with White Pierce with their systems.
Now the 5-day drawdown test, that actually, for the other project, actually came out of the South Berwick Water District.
That's right. Yep, that's right. And that's where that same request came from the South Berwick Water District for this one. So if we look at what the impact of this grow building has, I think the equivalency for this grow building is probably somewhere between 4 and 8 residential units for the water usage for this agricultural use. Now, I think that's probably more realistic than what has been presented to you folks, based on the research that I've have made on my own and discussions with the client for their dripless irrigation system and how much water gets used based on the size of the building here. So I guess my question here is that if there was a 6 or 7 or 8 unit subdivision going on over here, would South Berwick Water District be concerned? I don't know that.
I mean, normally a 5-day drawdown test is used to determine the safe yield of the well.
Well, yes, correct. And when I talked to John Leach, what he wanted to do with this 5-day drawdown test is at the same time this test is going on, they're monitoring their Junction Road well. And they wanted to see if there was going to be any fluctuations in their well based on that drawdown. That is the reason why they want to have that 5-day test.
I just think, we talked a lot about our comprehensive plan and being good neighbors and sharing thoughts with other towns, whether it be Lebanon or Berwick or North Berwick on development, this, that, and the other. I think if it's specifically coming from the South Berwick Water District and it raising a concern, I would like us to seriously consider requiring it as a condition in here, similar to what we just did on the other one.
Yeah,
And
I think it's fair.
I forget his last name spoke. He was concerned about drought and water table impacts. I think it just goes to show that we're being consistent in this narrow aquifer corridor.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
I understand that too, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Mr. Chairman, but the letter from the South Berwick Water District, that came out today to you folks, says if we can reuse the existing well, we don't have to do any testing. So that's the confusing part for me.
Well, that's true. I would think if you can satisfy with your own well, you're not asking anybody to analyze anything new. But if you do drill a new well, I think we ought to be consistent with what we're doing.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem giving the drilled well information to the town of South Berwick. I gave them the stuff for the information for the well that's already on site. And that's where they came up with that information that they put into their document today.
And what are they pumping that at?
15 gallons a minute.
15 gallons a minute. Yeah, so we didn't see this until just now.
Yeah, I came over late in the afternoon.
But I think that's fair to put that as a condition if a new well is drilled. I mean, it came up during the public hearing, and it's obviously a valid concern.
Consistency.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, we can definitely look into it. And then I guess what we would do is, it seems like in that letter that there's an option of either a 5-day test or pressure transducer with digital flow loggers for 2 years of the use. So either way, I think we can work with them and obviously provide the information to planning and code office in town to make sure that everything's out in the open there.
Okay, and James, you can have that for
And then one of the things I didn't, I'm sorry again, is one of the things I didn't cover before is that the new storefront building is going to have the same architectural appearance as the existing building there. They are separated because that's state of Maine law. A medical marijuana storefront and an adult use storefront cannot be in the same structure. So that's why we put them in there separated. We don't have a dumpster. All refuse is kept inside the building and would be disposed of properly. We don't have an exterior dumpster. We don't have a fence around the grow building because we have limited doors with security cameras and security access that we've talked with PD about for that in the past.
That's the little building west of the existing building that's going to be 15 or 20 feet away?
That's correct. 25 feet off of that existing kind of gravel pad that's back there now. Yep.
And the fire chief is aware, because, I mean, I wouldn't think he would want it any closer than 20 feet.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are code requirements where you can get it a little bit closer, but we are 25 feet in there, and we have that kind of fenced in between so that there's a security aspect of between the two buildings.
Anything else, Frank?
Well, the only other thing on the conditions, when we get to it, I would like to make sure where this also has a holding tank, that we are using the same condition that we just amended on there with the pump holdings and notifying the districts or the facility wherever it's going. I just want to make sure that those conditions that relate to wastewater and any discharges are the same for the two projects.
Yep, I think that's consistent. Yep.
And so you've requested to start construction on the adult use building prior to the grow facility. Should that be, I mean, if we agree to that, should that be on the conditions somewhere? And it shall.
I think that's, yeah.
I have a condition that the applicant shall submit DEP approval before a building permit will be granted for, I call it phase 2, the adult use cultivation and manufacturing.
Okay, all right. So phase 1 is the adult use storefront, phase 2 being the cultivation. That's how we'll word it, so that it's clear, since they will be built at separate times.
Yep.
Mike LaRue, oh, there you are. Your box moved. Mike LaRue, any questions?
No, I think I'm good.
David?
No, again, just as long as we're consistent.
Okay, has everybody had an opportunity to review the findings of fact, and is everybody comfortable with voting on these, or would you like more time? Because I know we've been very consumed with our other application, and I want to make sure we're as thorough as we need to be with this one.
But we went through that real detail with the first building.
Yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And this is an amendment to
Yeah.
it with the expansions.
Yes,
correct?
yeah. And the expansion
None
had
of those conditions should have changed in any way, shape, or form.
correct.
Right.
I'm happy with the level of thoroughness that we have carried out on this site, so.
And I'm very happy with how the applicant has built out the site thus far and maintained it. It's been nice. Mike, are you comfortable voting on findings of fact and conditions
Yes.
tonight? And David?
I am.
All right, well then, everybody's had a chance to review the findings of fact. Can I have a motion for the approval of the findings?
Do a motion to approve the findings of fact as amended.
Okay, so moved by David Ross Lyons as amended. And can I have a second?
I'll second.
And seconded by Mike LaRue. Further discussion on this?
Now, that is inclusive of the conditions, or are we gonna vote on the?
No,
conditions?
we are we're gonna do the conditions separately.
Okay.
This is just the findings. All right. So then we will do a roll call vote on the findings of fact. Mike LaRue,
Yes.
Frank Underwood,
Yes.
David Ross Lyons,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So now we're going to discuss the conditions of approval. I'm going to read through them and then we will add in what we need to add in. So condition number 1, the applicant shall provide a copy of their state of Maine license. Number 2, a water sample. Now this one is going to be expanded upon to match the 11 Pond Road condition. Correct? James, do you have the actual verbiage of that right in front of you?
I think the addition is that wherever the wastewater is being pumped to, that the test is provided to them.
And a copy for the code enforcement office.
Yep.
And it's either annually or on the pumping frequency.
Correct.
Okay, so the whole condition is a water sample shall be tested for priority pollutants and nutrients before any cultivation wastewater is discharged to a holding tank, and then tested annually thereafter. And we're going to amend that to be or upon first pumping, whichever comes first, right? The results shall be provided to the town, South Berwick Water District, the Berwick Sewer District, or wherever the effluent shall go, and the South Berwick Sewer District, and a copy in the Code Enforcement Officer office. Number 3, all pesticides and chemicals stored on site shall have a secondary containment, and that was a request of the South Berwick Water District, from my understanding. Number 4, the South Berwick Water District shall be furnished with a detailed well driller's log for the new well.
If a new well is provided?
If
a new well
yes,
is proposed?
if a new well is proposed. And then are we going to add in after this for the 5-day pump down, or the, as Jeff said, in that letter, it specifies either the 5-day pump down or an alternate 2-year monitoring. So we'll have that as the next condition.
I mean, or maybe it could be combined under the title, if a new well is drilled.
Okay, I like that. That sounds good. So that'll be number 4. Number 5, the water usage shall be tracked and provided to the South Berwick Water District and town on an annual basis.
And any bypass shall be security tagged.
Yep, absolutely.
And we added according to Mr. Rabel's suggestion.
Correct.
Can I interject? I have a question.
Yes.
Is that if a new well is drilled as well, too?
Nope, that is the water usage shall be tracked. Is that correct, right? That's for any well.
Either it's an existing well or a new well, correct?
Okay, that's your condition, or is that
Yes.
at the recommendation of South Berwick Water District?
That was our condition, I believe. Is that true? Is that South Berwick?
I mean, I think it comes from.
I thought it came from the. I thought it came
This is
from.
only for the
Okay.
cultivation, so this would not be for the
For the storefront, correct?
That's
Yes,
correct.
just for cultivation.
Yeah, the reason I asked for the clarification
Yeah.
is that letter that we received today from the South Berwick Water District is only requiring all of these extra inspection and reviews if a new well is drilled. If a new well is not drilled, then they're not requiring any notification.
It has been raised by the abutters about the water usage being of high concern, and their aquifer, which apparently you are not even in there within the boundary of their aquifer, but we just think it's best practices at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the more data that the planning department has, that's kind of where the thought process I had. And I mean, this is one of the conditions that if we find that your water usage is reasonable, you possibly could come back and ask to, we go, okay, the water usage is this, you're not expanding the building. We might not need 3 years down the road, might not need to ask for the tracking if we know what the baseline is. But obviously that would have to come back to planning board.
And regardless,
Thank you.
regardless if it's our condition or the South Berwick, I think what James is saying, we want it, we need it.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get a clarification.
Yeah, it was a hybrid of both. I mean, both the neighbors' concern and the water, and just I think the data would be good to have for us.
For us, because we have no idea.
Yeah, yeah, it's all new.
Number 6, if an odor violation is determined by the code enforcement officer, the applicant shall resolve the issue within 5 days. Code enforcement officer may revoke the certificate of occupancy if the odor issues are not resolved within 5 days. And number 7, the applicant shall submit DEP approval before a building permit will be granted for phase 2, the adult use cultivation and manufacturing facility. Was there anything else that needed to be added? I can't take any comments from the.
I just didn't even.
I'm sorry. You're gonna have to wait until we're finished here.
Okay. There's a really.
Okay, you have to wait until we're finished. We're in the middle of a meeting. Yes. Thank you. Hearing no other conditions needed or no other amendments, I'm looking for a motion to approve the conditions.
I'll make a motion, we approve the conditions for the expanded paper birch site.
And a second?
A second.
Okay, so moved by Frank Underwood, second by David Ross Lyons. Roll call vote. Mike LaRue?
Yes.
Frank Underwood?
Yes.
David Ross Lyons?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So to finalize, I need a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the applicant Paper Birch Properties at 357 Portland Street.
I'll move that we approve the application.
Moved by Frank Underwood. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing nobody come forth, I will do a roll call vote. Mike LaRue?
Yes.
Frank Underwood?
Yes.
David Ross Lyons?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And I now recognize Chairman Dave Andreessen back.
Thank you, nice job.
Thank you.
And I think I have to unrecognize David Ross Lyons as a voting member at this point. Put my microphone on.
Oh. Jeff's staying around.
Next, we move into new business, subdivision amendment, lot line adjustment, Pleasant Drive. It's map R32, lot 17-3 and 21. It's in the R2 zone. The applicant is, or representing the applicant, Timothy George, is civil consultants tonight. So James, I'll turn it over to you.
This one's pretty simple. The subdivision amendment is to fix a barn was placed on the wrong property. So what's going to happen is about 4,329 square feet from tax map R32 17-3 goes to R32 21. The amendment now will put the barn on the correct property and will meet all applicable setback requirements. R32 17-3 remains a conforming lot, and R32 21 increases in conformity as a result of the amendment. Every finding except for 11.9 is non-applicable, and that just speaks to the conformance with the dimensional requirements.
Oh, I like your new little, I like how that is. That's good. It's easier to see.
Yeah, Jeff, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. It's really straightforward. It's just one neighbor selling land to another neighbor to take care of the building issue.
It's a complicated lot line adjustment.
Yeah.
So can you just go over the steps that we have to take, that we can take tonight? Because we can vote this all the way through.
Right, you can make a motion to approve the application.
Just like that?
Yeah.
Can I just
Approve the lot
ask a
line.
question?
Sure, Frank.
I know in towns, other towns, and maybe Jeff has experience with this, but there's a requirement they have that you must have a certified foundation survey performed and a statement. And I know when we did it in Barrington.
Let's throw that over to Jennifer. Jennifer, you want to elaborate?
So it's really funny that he's bringing this up because we also found this week. So yes, you are correct, Frank.
For any,
We,
for anything
I
with,
didn't hear what you said, Jennifer. Do we have that in our ordinance now, or is it something we should consider to avoid these scenarios going forward?
Frank, it's actually in our ordinance right now with anything that's within 5 feet of the property line. You are correct.
And that's a pretty standard form, I think surveyors use to fulfill that issue of certification.
That is correct. That was actually found in our ordinance this week, Frank, so it's funny you're bringing it up.
And to be honest, Frank, I'm filling in for Tom Harmon on this one, and I have a feeling that barn may have been there, that little shed barn thing, that may have been there for a while, but I don't know that for sure. And it's just something they're taking, kind of squaring it away, making sure that the land swap issue goes forward now. But I don't know that.
I think that the selectmen have gotten, Jennifer, maybe you can offer this. Have the selectmen got involved in affidavits where we've had property line disputes in the past? And is this something that needs to go to the board as well, or is this just something we can simply?
There's no property line dispute. He's selling his property.
I realize.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
Yeah, it's just because it's before you folks, because this was part of an older subdivision. So as a result of this lot line adjustment, it has to come back to the planning board for review. If this was something, out in the woods and obviously lots that weren't created out of subdivision, and they wanted to adjust the property line, they could just do that through their lawyers and deeds and do it that way. But since this one is part of the old subdivision from way back when, and I'm trying to look it up, it's in there, from 73, it was called Colonial Acres, where these lots were originally shown. That's why it's in front of you folks tonight.
Jeff, how big is that barn? Doesn't look very big.
No, I don't think it is either. I'm looking at it.
Probably like 12 by 20 or something.
Yeah, not if that.
Yeah, and I see a chicken coop.
I was gonna say, whose chicken coop is
right
that?
on the property line, but I guess that's okay because I mean.
Yeah, I think that's the next. That's on
the other side. Yeah.
Okay.
So what are the steps we have to follow here to get this thing through the process?
yeah, so there's no creations of lots, so you can approve it based off of our subdivision regulations.
So all we're approving is an amended subdivision?
Yep, it's just a pretty simple lot line adjustment, and it's approval to a previously approved subdivision.
Right. I think we've had 3 of these this year, and we don't have findings of fact, conditions of approval, anything like that. You're just voting on the application.
There are findings.
Yeah.
These are the findings.
The findings are fact.
Well,
are-
yeah. Okay.
No condition.
Do we have to vote the findings of fact, though? We could just approve it without doing all that,
You can approve the application with the findings.
with the findings of fact. Okay. I move we approve the subdivision amendment, lot line adjustment for Pleasant Drive with the findings of fact.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Frank Underwood. Further discussion.
I had a stare down with Mike on this one.
I accidentally had the mute button on.
Further discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. David Ross Lyons.
You removed me as a voting
Oh,
member.
I'm sorry. You're right. I did.
Yeah, but he can vote. That makes
Look at
5, doesn't it?
that dirty look.
Winston's out today.
Yeah, Sean's out, so he could be a voting member.
Dave can vote.
That's
Makes
true.
5, correct?
That's true. We'll make you a voting member again. Thank you for the math. Thank you for the math, Frank. David Ross Lyons.
Yes.
Nicole.
Yes.
Mike LaRue.
Yes.
And Frank.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, so there it is.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Have a good night.
You too.
Next on the agenda is the public comment session. It's open to any resident or property owner in the town of Berwick to come forward and talk about anything that relates to the planning board. If you just come to the podium, just state your name or your address for the record. Public comment session is open.
Hi, Heidi Levier, 11 Perry's Way, and Pond Road, 13 Pond Road. I escaped me that you were even voting on the kind one tonight. I was so focused on the other, but I not really in opposition to it, but I wanted to try to get in understanding on what regulations are with alarms. I have had this go off for from like 11 p.m. to after midnight. And this
Where's
is
that?
at my
Where's that
house.
taken?
That's Kind Farms.
And that's from your house?
That's from my house.
All right. That's a noise ordinance issue?
It is. Yep.
And
You
they
gotta-
take over an hour to respond. The police department take a while to respond. And when the police come, they can't turn it off. They have to wait until the owners get there and, I don't know, reset the code or something, but
That's something that, Jennifer, you can,
my children have a hard enough time falling asleep, and it takes me hours because they had been through a lot and nightmares, and then that just completely derails the night even further, and then they get scared that we're being robbed and whatnot. So
Heidi, how often does it happen?
it actually hasn't happened since June 26th.
But before
It was
then?
my birthday present. So hopefully it's addressed. I don't even know if it was like real, if someone triggered it, it got away, or if it was false, but I think it's happened 4 times.
3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And you can hear it loud like that from your house.
Oh yeah, that's at my house. That's
Oh,
in
yeah. Dave Webster can hear it, which is on the other side of Marlene, so.
So like it's just I mean I get that things are faulty and I mean nothing's perfect, but I just think that's a really bad response time.
Yeah.
Especially if like something real were going on. So I mean I called the Berwick PD, actually I didn't, my friend did, but they were really the dispatcher was really kind enough to give us suggestions like make sure the whole neighborhood gets lit up, like I dragged Paul out of bed, like so because we didn't know if it's like really someone running around the neighborhood or anything like that. So yeah, that's all. I was just like I said, I was just so focused on the other that I did want to try to get that in.
Okay.
okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, sir?
One question.
Can you state your name for the record and your address, please?
Chris
Thank you.
Macias. One question that was left off this thing, and it's a very important question. It affects not only the town, but every town, the state, and possibly the whole state. Now, when they grow all these pot farms, you got them going up all over the place, and the price goes down. So it costs you more to produce it than you're gonna make from it. We're gonna get stuck with the bill. There's nothing in there for a bond or anything that's gonna cover us. We got a perfect example right across the street. And those things are there's more of them than there is one across the street. And that's something you gotta think about because we're gonna get stuck with it. Nothing lasts forever.
Okay.
Over some scientist is gonna say this hurt, some of that, you know, they're gonna pull left and right, and they're just gonna walk away because they're all in corporations. They just walk away, pull the thing, go bankrupt, and we're stuck with it. And I don't think that's a dumb question because I've seen it happen many times. I've known many, many businessmen who bought businesses out just to fold them because they could make more money by folding them. And it's something to think about because it's gonna affect your kids more than anything.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else for public comment session? Seeing nobody else come forward, I'll close the public comment session. Next is informational items and anything from the board. The only thing I want to say tonight is good job, Nicole. Very good job. I was just about to leave and just have you run the whole meeting, but you did a very good job. Like I said, thank everybody who came. I'm sorry it's not the turnout that you wanted. I'm sorry all the time and the money that you spent in trying to get this not approved. And I also just want to point out the sheer arrogance of the applicant this evening. And I'll remember that next time he comes back to the board. That's not going to sway my thinking because, you know, I have to recuse myself from this. But the sheer arrogance, and I wish that if there's other applicants who come in here to the town that want to be part of this town, that are not from this town, that would have a little bit more dignity and treat the people who are going to be their neighbors than the way that gentleman conducted himself tonight. That's all.
Agree.
Anybody else? Nicole?
I do have something I missed that because I was just trying to get this meeting done. So I didn't see it, but I'm sure I'll hear about it after this. I actually came to this meeting 100% ready to tender my resignation from the planning board after serving for 7 years, because this particular application took its toll on me. It was a lot, and it made my job here not fun. And this is actually one of my favorite things that I do. And contrary to popular belief, I lose a lot of business because I'm on the planning board. I get a lot of flack on social media because of the planning board. I have people come in and disrespect me. I'm on the planning board. But I love this job and I love this town so much. And I was 100%, David knows, I was going to come in and tender my resignation tonight after this. But I talked to Paul Bover, who can talk a little bit now, and he said, don't let him get you down. We've worked so hard, and we've all put in so many hours, and we've worked tirelessly. We've worked on 4th of July week that one time. We've worked double meetings. We've worked every Thursday in a month to set the land use regulations for that across the street. And he just said it would be a shame to do all of that when right now across the street's about to start being developed, and not to be here to see that development through. So I'm not tendering my resignation, but I'm glad that application is done. That's all.
David?
Now that you invoke
Hold on, David?
Paul's name,
Hold on, Frank. I already recognize David.
I know Nicole was ready to tender her resignation after this, as were, I'm sure, a few other people. This was a very challenging application. That being said, I'm very proud of our town and the neighbors, their research, their diligence of trying to stop this. There's an opening on this board.
Okay, I was going to bring that up as well. There is an opening on this board. I would like you to consider, if people are interested in that, we need people who can do the due diligence.
We're thorough.
And care.
And care, yeah.
wouldn't
Frank?
be the first time we got somebody from the audience and the public that come on a board, and we made him chair in 3 weeks. That was Rob Libby. But that being said, you invoked Paul's name, and I wanted you to know I'm working on him to come back to the planning board. You guys would probably prefer to have Paul than me, but Paul,
He talks a lot less.
Mike, do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay, anything from staff?
Just please sign the findings and the plans in front of you. Thank you.
New fire station CO will, they have a schedule, well, they've changed the schedule, but it's now September 11th at 9:45 a.m. The state electrical examiner, Brian LaFlame, he's coming down at the same time. He's gonna do his inspection, I'm gonna do mine, and hopefully that they'll be able to move in that following week, so they're pretty excited about that.
Is the town planning on having a dedication ceremony?
That I'm not sure of. I do know that they have a hiccup with one of the floors right now, and it's being dealt with. From then they can move on from there to get CO, but
No hiccup with that lighted sidewalk next to the building though, right?
not yet. I haven't
What
seen
is the-
anything on it yet.
What is the status of the cracked floor?
The cracked floor is, they had an engineer, so if you don't know, in the equipment part of the building, they have it's a crack in the slab. It's obviously not down to the radiant heating, thank God. I will tell you that, against popular opinion, it is getting worse. So I'm waiting to see how they plan on fixing it before stepping in and giving them some ideas as well.
Just so that you know, Jen, when we went through that, I raised that question about that thick floor and being poured as one slab.
Yep.
And they were touting this new combo concrete steel composition that meant that it would all work in harmony. So we're on the record at the planning board questioning that. So if you need some additional proof, you can go back to those records. And I particularly spoke to that issue. I was concerned about that.
Well, my concern is, why was it used in the way it was when it was still green? My other concern is, why wasn't it saw cut? So that's where we're at with that.
All right, anything else, Jen?
No.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Next on the agenda is the adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by David Ross Lyons. All in favor? All right, have a good evening.
Guys, sorry for coming in that way, but I knew that I had
You were like, I gotta get.
Well, I was sitting at home and I'm like, I gotta go.
Actually, could I just talk to you guys as people?
Yeah.
I do thank you for everything that you did. I mean, I know it's not easy, and I know this is like a hobby. It's not even a job, so I appreciate that. But I just guess I need